I have dyscalculia or dyscalculia, depending on how you pronounce it. And that is a math learning disability where I struggle with numbers, but that struggle goes beyond just the math class.
Well, welcome to Hello World, Michelle. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story with our audience.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I certainly appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, I would like to start with a little fun get to know you question.
hmm
Using three words or three short phrases that best describe who you are. If you want to share those with us, I did give you a pre-warning, so you hopefully had a little bit of time to kind of select those words.
No, that is perfectly fine. Some of the things that I have heard from other people as
Mm.
well. I am caring, I am
Oh.
kind, and I'm creative.
Oh, those are wonderful three words. That's
Thank
that's
you.
okay. You say creative, kind, and what's that? Oh, you like to help people.
Yes, definitely.
That's fantastic. Well, that goes right into our episode today because you're using your abilities to help others. This is thank you for sharing that. And on top of the episode where we introduced you, we talked
Mhm.
about learning disabilities and that you were diagnosed with learning disabilities at a very young age. Do you mind sharing with our audience what what learning challenges are you living with?
Sure. I have dyscalculia or dyscalculia, depending on how you pronounce it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a math learning disability where I struggle with numbers, but that struggle goes beyond just the math class. I can struggle with things such as directional concepts,
Mm.
and I can confuse my right from my left. I also have limited hand dexterity in both of my hands, and that wasn't diagnosed until I was an adult. And I also have visual perception issues, but the problem isn't in my eyes, it's in my brain.
I see. So those are all related to dyscalculia. Is that, did I say it
Yeah,
right?
yes,
Okay.
exactly. They are all, yep,
Oh, so because I had to Google for a second what that is, and it's the short forms is like math dyslexia,
yes.
and but it goes actually beyond that. So dealing with numbers and sometimes directions and oh, I see.
hmm
Well, that makes it a little bit inconvenient in life, isn't it?
It sure does. It can be really difficult.
Mm-hmm.
During my school years, it really impacted me academically and socially.
Mm.
That was the main thing that did. But in my adult years, it has affected things not only academic and socially, but also with everyday life. Things such as driving and opening up doors and unlocking things and budgeting can really be difficult
Oh,
with
wow.
having the learning disabilities.
Things that we take for granted,
hmm
opening doors, things that we take for granted could be a challenge. So interesting to know. Now I learned a little bit about your what you I guess live with. Is that a right way to say it?
Yes.
That what you live with through your well written article, and it's called "My Disability is Not Black and White; It's a Rainbow." And I want to quote this beginning part because you set it up so well. You said that a rainbow occurs when the sun and the rain occur together. Two opposite forces occurring at once creates a beautiful flash of color in the sky. My learning disability functions like a rainbow. Can you elaborate a little bit more about this rainbow and these forces?
Well, one of the things that having a learning disability just goes along with is that is the rain. That
Mm,
is the storm that I came across whenever I was a small child.
mm-hmm.
And when I was really little, all I could see was the storm. All I could see was the rain coming down.
Yes.
But what I can now look back on and just see in my life now is there was some sun. There was a lot of sunshine. There was a lot of happiness and a lot of joy that was going to happen. And whenever the sun and the rain will come together, it creates the rainbow. And it's just a reflection of the light. And the light and seeing the beauty and all of that, that didn't come until I was a lot later in my life. But then I got to see, oh, having a learning disability isn't the end of the world. There's a lot of beauty in it that I can help myself and I can help others with that. And another key piece about the rainbow is it has different colors. We have red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. And that also represents the different types of disabilities. And when a lot of people think about learning disabilities or even other types of disabilities, it's very black and white to them, a lot of people. It's a person with a disability can't learn. With a learning disability can't learn. Or somebody that you can't have a disability if where's your cane or where's your walker?
Yes.
And much like the different colors of a rainbow, that's the way that having a disability is. They come in a wide range of colors, and it's not a black and white thing. And it's just a lot of times on how somebody learns to view and accept their disability is so important.
Like you said, learning disability, I heard it's also called like invisible disability. Sometimes it's not observable until you're actually interacting with them. So that really helps us to understand that you can't just necessarily see it from the surface. How do you, I mean, I don't think you will walk around and say I have a disability, because sometimes it's nice that they don't know, but sometimes the expectations there that you kind of wish they do know. How do you cope with that? That wanting them to know and yet not wanting them to know, how do you deal with that?
A lot of it really depends on the situation. I do have that privilege that I can walk into a room and people don't see the disability that somebody might have with a visible disability or a physical one. So that can make it a little easier for people that don't know me to automatically make an assumption.
Right.
But it can be really hard when I struggle in the community, or it can be really difficult, especially if I'm at work. And those are some times where I do have to sometimes say that I have a disability. The school year will be starting tomorrow, and yeah, which is wonderful. I'm also working with a new people. It's a new position, new teachers, and I had to go around today and explain to people that who I was and that I had a math learning disability, and I cannot help the kids with math. They all know this, usually by the beginning of the year. And thankfully, I work for a school where having learning disabilities and other types of disabilities is a big part of our culture. So one of the teachers I was working with is like, that's fine, we can accommodate you. That works out for us. But it can be hard sometimes to explain that to people that don't quite understand what they are. A lot of times, if I'm talking with somebody that they don't know that I have a learning disability and they wonder, well, why can't you drive? Or why can't you do math or understand the directions?
Right.
I'll tell them, well, I have a learning disability. And they'll say, well, you don't look like you're disabled.
You should just give them your article, because it was so well written that I think you mentioned that it was frustrating because you would be good at one part of a subject, and then struggle with another part of the same subject. Can you like give me an example how that works? Is it yeah.
A great example is reading. I am a very fluent reader, and I read with a lot of expression, and I know a lot of words. But I struggle with reading comprehension. So I can remember I was in learning support, and my other peers were wondering, well, why are you here? You can read so well. And they struggled more with the reading than I did. And my teacher said she just needs a little extra help with that. But sometimes I could read a sentence perfectly or a paragraph with very little errors. And if you would ask me, okay, what did you read about? I would, it could be really hard for me to fill in some of those details.
Yes.
And people would tell me, well, you just need to slow down when you read. And
Mm-hmm.
that only helps a little bit. It's learning how to engage with the text and to ask questions and to find the important information. That really became a factor whenever I was in regular ed classes. I would read a chapter and it was hard for me to know what information was important for studying for a test, and sometimes I wouldn't do very well on it because I would fixate on something else that
Mm-hmm.
wasn't necessary.
So, what's really interesting that I'm learning myself through
Mm-hmm.
just our conversation right now and through your article is, you have this dyscalculia, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you think it's just the math thing. But you just mentioned the struggles also in other areas that you didn't expect that if I didn't understand it better to show up. So it really is important to understand when someone's sharing with you that they have learning disabilities to understand the different presentations so you can be sensitive to those needs, because I think that's what you said, that your learning disability is not black and white and fits in neat categories. They kind of show up wherever it shows up, right?
Exactly. It does not have just one place that it'll show up.
Mm-hmm.
It can show up also with processing
Mm.
things too. Sometimes somebody can give me directions and it doesn't involve math, but I can get those confused. And it's just learning how to be able to compensate and
Mm-hmm.
really be able to know what strategies work for me
I see.
and how I can learn best.
I see. So in at least in the American school system, standardized testing is
Mhm.
definitely a thing. And I personally, I'm a horrible test taker. So how do you address that? How do you address that in your experience with a test
Right.
taking?
I did have standardized testing, and I can still remember
Mm-hmm.
I would take the test and we would get the results back, and nothing was ever really surprising. I can remember they had like the little straws and that showed like a bar graph on your
Yes.
scores. And
Mm-hmm.
I'd have a big area with reading that was good. And then my math would be this little tiny bar. And I can
Mm-hmm.
remember looking at that, and I always felt bad. And they always had like suggestions of working with me. And my parents did work with me, and the school was wonderful with accommodations and doing a lot of strategies. But I just always felt bad when I did that because sometimes I felt when I took that test, they were testing me on things that they thought I should know. And they never asked me, well, what do you know? It was always on what somebody else thought I should know.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really difficult for me. And I don't think they always accurately described me as a whole person. Sure, they said that I was bad at math. We knew that from
Yes,
the
thank
time I
you
was
for
very young.
pointing out the obvious, right? for
Yeah,
for you.
and that
Mm-hmm.
right. And but they never got to what I was really good at. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people would see the scores and they thought, well, based on this, she really can't do a whole lot. And
Mm.
they would think that they would try to limit me with that.
Mm.
And then other people, they saw it and said, okay, this is a learning disability. She's better at reading. She's better at punctuation. That's a good thing. And okay, she definitely needs the extra support in math, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what the school provided. And I also can remember in the high school years, we had to take a standardized test, and I remember them giving the test out, and the guidance counselor was saying, this is the most important test you'll take. This is going to determine whether you're living in the shack in
Oh my
an undesirable
gosh.
neighborhood or you're going to have a great job.
Oh my
And
gosh. It's the score
I
that's going to
know.
dictate your life.
Yeah, that's what he was saying. And I was a little concerned. And it was a science test, which science can be really hard because it has the
Mm-hmm.
math. As far as I know, no, none of the jobs that I've worked at have ever called the school up and said, hey, what score did she get back in ninth grade? I haven't had that.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps I had, maybe they did, but none of the jobs that I chose did that. And I didn't end up living in the neighborhood they said if you didn't pass that test, you were going to be at.
Oh my goodness. It's stressful already to take these tests, and to add
Mhm.
that, it's going to dictate your life. It's not helpful. Come on, guidance counselors. Come on.
Yeah.
So with your learning disability and how you perform at school and through the test
Mhm.
scores, how have your teachers been, um, I guess, how have they been supporting you?
A lot of what we did when I was young was I had to repeat kindergarten for a second time, and I began to receive specialty instruction. I had just work based upon my level
Mm-hmm.
when I was young in the beginning. And
Mm-hmm.
then they start to see, oh, she can read. So I
Mm-hmm.
was able to be in more regular ed classes. I was
Mm-hmm.
in regular ed for reading, science, and social studies. I still had some learning support classes. And of course, math. I was always in there for math.
Mm-hmm.
I eventually I was in all regular ed classes except for math by the time I was in high school.
Yeah.
And I also had a resource room. And I was given support such as having extended test time.
Mm-hmm.
And they would also read the test aloud to me. And just hearing that and having that extra time helped my brain to process the information a lot
Mm-hmm.
better. I had some teachers who were very understanding and
Mm-hmm.
went the extra mile and really encouraged me.
Mm-hmm.
They did a lot based on my strengths.
Yes.
But I also had some other ones that weren't quite that understanding. I can remember, even in the elementary school, my handwriting is affected by my learning disability. And you
The
basically can't read
coordination
it.
part. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Mm-hmm.
everything made sense when they had me diagnosed with the limited
Mm-hmm.
hand dexterity in both hands.
Mm-hmm.
But I had a teacher put W on my report card indicating weakness in handwriting. And that was really difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And I also had some other teachers. I can remember I had one, I was coloring a map, and he held my map up and said, "Does this look like she's doing her best?" So that
Oh
was a
no.
real, that was difficult. And my
Mm-hmm.
parents did advocate for me and talk to the school, and we
Mm-hmm.
didn't have that issue again.
Mm-hmm.
And I also had a teacher, whenever we were doing all the post-secondary classes, what am I going to do after school? She knew I wanted to go to college, but she didn't think I could do it because of my math, and
Mm.
recommended trade school, which is fine, but nothing there interested me. Thankfully, I had a lot of people who were encouraging. I had a student teacher during the time when we were figuring out what I was going to do post-secondary, and she said, "You can go to college because you know how to study." And sometimes just hearing her voice
Yes.
was the voice that I remember whenever things got really hard after high school.
This is a student teacher. This
Mm-hmm.
is not even your seasoned teacher. This is a student teacher.
Yep.
So, message to student teachers out there: your words can matter, even as you're learning to become a teacher. That's
Yes.
amazing. I wanted to also, explore a little bit about, it's great that the teachers were nice, and
Mhm.
some weren't as nice, but kids is a whole nother story.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
I don't want to spend too much time on that, but just to understand where you came from,
Mhm.
right? How were they?
It was really difficult for me socially. Part of the reason for the difficulty was I was an only child for a number of years.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a lot more adult interactions by the time I went into kindergarten rather than other kids. And having the disability made me stick out like a sore thumb. I
Mm-hmm.
can remember the small school I went to didn't value diversity. And it was really hard to hide and blend in. Everybody knew I went to learning support, and the teasing and the bullying started really early when I was young.
Yes.
And as a kid in elementary school, it was, "I don't want to be your friend," or "I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
play with you on the playground." And it got harder as I got through school because it was more, the groups were a lot more defined, and I just didn't feel like I fit in anywhere.
Mm.
So one of the things that really helped, though, is I found an art program in a neighboring school district. And
Art
I
program.
Yes,
Oh,
it was
okay.
a ministry program.
Mm-hmm.
They had different things planned, and the basis was art for one of the recreation. And I remember I participated in their newsletter. And this gave me the chance to meet other students that didn't know who I was, and they were in a different school, but they had the same interest.
Yes.
And I was accepted by them, and I could shed that reputation that I had for so many years later, that I had for so many years. And I was also able to branch out in the community to meet other people. My friends, I found them in a writing group, and
Yes.
they were just a couple years older than I was, and
You're
they
mature,
accepted
more
me.
mature anyways, because you had adult interactions early. So,
Right. I had, yeah, exactly. I had the adult interactions, and I'm still friends with them 20 some years later, and we have a writers group that still meets once a month.
what you just share is, I think, is a really important tip, because
Mhm.
folks with learning disabilities, there are many, and I'm sure they all struggle at school that they're where they're known.
Mhm.
But to find another area outside of that community, you can flourish. And I think that isn't that important to know what you are experiencing at school is just one aspect of humanity, and there's so much more elsewhere. To know that you're actually I'm okay. They're the one who's struggling with me, but I am actually okay. Wow, that's. I'm glad you found that community and gave yourself the, because I feel like you're so positive right now expressing life through the lens of a rainbow as opposed to dark clouds. Would you say that probably helped?
Definitely. It has really helped with their acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I would go through things in school or college, and they couldn't go in and change my grade or change the fact that I had a disability or
Mm-hmm.
help in that way. But the way they were able to help me was being a friend and just being able to hang out with them on the
Mm-hmm.
weekends and talking with them over coffee, over things, and just having that friendship. Sometimes that just made all the difference in the world. And being able to see
Yes.
you through that tough time, but also coming out on the other side with
Mm-hmm.
graduations or grades or just weddings and things. And those are just the things that really matter.
So having the struggle like you have
Mm-hmm.
shared through your high school, but you chose to continue in post secondary.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that student teacher gave you some, I guess, encouragement that you
Mm-hmm.
can do this because she recognized that you are a studious student, that you actually put
Mm-hmm.
in the effort. So what was post secondary like?
Well, in the beginning, it was really difficult for me. I can remember one of the agencies I got involved with,
Mm-hmm.
Office for Vocational Rehabilitation. They were great about paying for school.
Okay.
And one of the things, though, is I had to get tested for a learning disability all over again. And I, once again, found more limitations. I can
Mm.
remember the psychiatrist telling me, you're most likely not going to go beyond community college. We had those uh, once again, standardized testing that and I don't test well, and the scores were pretty low. And when I got to community college, I did not receive a whole lot of support with accommodations. A lot of they were out there, but I had a lot of my peers said, "Well, those are cheating, or that gives you an unfair advantage." And I even had a professor when I was reaching out to her, she told me that my job choices would be really limited.
Mm.
And just with all of that uh, negativity, and the stigma, that's why I didn't get a lot of the accommodations early on. And I wish I would have done that because my grades dropped dramatically because I wasn't getting the supports that I needed. And it wasn't until I was in a class with a professor, and I was really struggling in her class. And she
Mm-hmm.
said, "Why don't we at least get you extended test time?" And I didn't do well in her class, but I was able to pass that. And I was able to pass my other classes as well. Got a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
And I graduated with an associate's degree in early childhood education. But I used the accommodations later on when using them sooner would have been better for me.
So the reason why, because you got through testing, and then the results were, what did you say was awful, was poorly, that's what you
Just
said?
well, definitely it was the math was
Uh-huh.
poor. That
Mm-hmm.
was really bad.
Mm-hmm.
And there just was people thought based upon a lot of the tests that I couldn't do certain things. They didn't think I could handle community college. Even
Mm-hmm.
when I went back to get testing for some other things I needed to have the documentation for, uh, with my bachelor's degree, they told me that whenever I put interest in news articles or writing things or doing plays, they told me I couldn't do that. And
That's
I
mm,
love to say that I've been able to do a lot of those things, not the math, but a lot of those
yes.
interests I'm able to do
Mm-hmm.
as long as I use the supports that are out there.
That were out there. So the reason why you did not use the support
Mhm.
in community college, is it because it wasn't given to you, or you mentioned that it was the stigma in maybe back then learning disability and accommodations wasn't as well publicized as it is more so, I feel like in present time, that you didn't feel comfortable in using it.
Right. It was the stigma. The accommodations were out there. I just didn't use them because I didn't like the stigma that was attached to them.
Mm-hmm.
But whenever I went back to school after I moved in with my parents for
Mm-hmm.
financial reasons,
Mm-hmm.
I used the accommodations that were offered and I advocated for myself. And that is what made all the difference. I was able to make Dean's List for a semester. I was I did well. I was able to graduate with the bachelor's degree. And I
Yes.
wasn't working at the time,
Mm-hmm.
which really helped too, because I could dedicate my time with studying
Studying.
rather than trying to work 20 hours a week and be a full-time student. That was really tough as well.
What made you more open or risk the stigma the second time around
I
when you
think a
went
lot
back
of
to
it,
school?
sure. A lot of it was age, I think was a big factor. I
Mm-hmm.
was more mature than I was when I graduated high school. I knew that other people were going to maybe not approve of them, maybe
Mm-hmm.
think that uh, they were definitely giving me an unfair advantage. But I learned at that point that I just had to push those voices aside and focus on what I needed to do. I also had a few different employers by that time. So I
Okay.
think that helped me out too with learning how to communicate with authority figures and work through some problems. That was another factor as well.
Mm-hmm. So I guess you mentioned also in your article, you embrace the fact that you have learning disability and you
Yes.
need the accommodations. And
Hmm.
I think what I heard is during your high school, elementary school time, you were given that and you used the accommodations, but in community college you didn't, and you saw the
Hmm.
difference of not using it. They
Exactly.
were helpful. So then now in when you went back to school, and you did use it and you actually made the dean's list, it made the difference. So having that paradigm
Yes.
shift is was an important
It
transition.
was. It was really important having that, definitely. And that increased my confidence and it helped
Mm-hmm.
me to accept my disability as well. I think that was the main thing. It was owning the fact that I had a learning disability and these were things that I was going to need to be able to do to be successful.
Yes.
And when I finally got my bachelor's degree, that gave me that confidence that I use today. I use it
Mm-hmm.
when I work with my students.
Mm-hmm.
I use it whenever I write about having a learning disability. Writing has always been really healing for me. I had a
Mm-hmm.
friend that told me years ago in my writers group, you should write about having a learning disability. And I told her, well, that's too personal. But when
That's right.
yeah, and I think I wrote some bad poetry, some other really cringeworthy stories and art stories and things
Mm-hmm.
uh, that I wouldn't want to read now. But I think when I finally embraced, I have a learning disability, and I'm okay with writing about it. then that is when my confidence really soared. I can still remember the first article I wrote.
Mm-hmm.
It was published on the Mighty about my struggle of opening up doors with limited hand dexterity. And I was so afraid for a lot of years that people were going to reject me because of having the disability. And for the most part, the opposite happened. People were running towards me saying, I understand, I
Mm-hmm.
have a disability like that, or I know somebody that does. And people just gave me that encouragement
Mm-hmm.
for the most part. And I just wanted to write more articles by that point. And I started to get more things published and a few other places. And then I began my own blog called Michelle's Mission,
Mm-hmm.
where I'm able to put disability related articles. And I'm also able to put my photography as well. I'm
Yeah, tell
not,
us about, well, before you get to the
yeah.
photography, I think the writing part is where you're using your strength,
Hmm.
right? To because you like you said, when you test it, the tall bars are always
Yeah.
the reading and writing part. And in that article that I've been referencing quite a bit is so enlightening and
Hmm.
helps people to understand learning disability. And right now you're also a paraeducator.
Yes.
So you're actually your degree is in
Community programming for Americans with disabilities. That's my bachelor's. And my associate's is early childhood education. But the bachelor's is in the service end of special education.
mm-hmm. How it seems natural that you would be in this line of work, if you will. Is that
Hmm.
something you wanted to do, always wanted to do, or this is something that um, that it's a gift that life brought you?
I think it's a mixture of both. It's a
Mm-hmm.
gift to be able to write, but it's also a gift to be able to connect and be able to help other people that have disabilities. And I
Mm-hmm.
knew from the time I was very young, I wanted to have a job where I could help other people that had disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And I also wanted to be able to use the creative side of myself as well.
Mm-hmm. How in your work with students? Because I'm sure you get flashbacks to, boy, when
Hmm.
I was in school. Um, what is the one or two things that you see the student needs the most, that you're able to provide for them as a paraeducator and also as someone who have walked in their shoes?
I think the first thing our students need is encouragement, because
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of students that are going into school and they think that they're stupid and that they can't
Mm-hmm.
learn and things are going to be hard. And it's just encouraging and looking for those gifts of things that they're good at. If they're good at writing, or if they're good at art, or even if I can't help them with their math, but if they're really good at doing math, or just anything that I can just see a gift in, and to show them, okay, maybe you struggle with this,
Mm-hmm.
but you're really good at that, and to encourage that and to foster that. I also see students that need to be able to have just that sense that it's okay to have a disability. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of times it's like hearing a recording of myself at that age. I hate my learning disability. I hate having an individual education plan. And I get that opportunity to tell them it's okay to have a disability. And that education plan is there to help you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think just hearing that from another person that has a disability, sometimes I share about the disability. Other times I might just say, okay, I can't help you with math, but I can help you in other areas.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that too, having that humility
Mm-hmm.
also helps kids to see that other teachers, they struggle with things too.
Yes.
Yeah, we're not all good at everything.
Mm-mm. Perfect. And now I see that you're writing related to providing, helping others to understand learning disabilities, and then are there resources that you find that you're able to share? How do you advocate for those with disabilities outside of the classroom?
There is definitely always resources for people that have disabilities, and I
Mm-hmm.
think it's sharing a lot of the ones that are local,
Mm-hmm.
or even the ones where people can go in their own community
Mm-hmm.
and try to find some of those.
Mm-hmm.
I know Office for Vocational Rehabilitation is a great one. They pay for testing to see if you have a qualifying disability. And if you do, they pay for school. They also provide accommodations for jobs and things like that. I have more luck with them with school, though. There's also health and human service agencies in the community
Mm-hmm.
that can help out for different areas with different types of disabilities,
Sure.
not just learning disabilities. And I think it's sharing tips and tricks from other people and what works. That's
Mm-hmm.
one of the things I try to do on my blog, is have
Yes.
people write about on the forum, just things that might work for them with different kind of questions. And it's just getting the word out
Mm-hmm.
for things that work.
Yeah, we'll definitely share the link to your
Mm-hmm.
blog in the show notes so that people can
Thank you.
find you and be able to tap into your knowledge that you're sharing with others. Okay, now tell us about the photography. That's also a happenstance that with your situation, but yeah, share with us, how did that come about? You're not only a advocate, paraeducator, writer, and a photographer, so share with us about that. That was so interesting.
One of the things that I started is taking pictures. I can sometimes find details that other people might miss. Because I can't drive because of my disability, I get to sit in the passenger side of
Mm-hmm.
the car. So I'll be in the car with my husband and I'll say, "Did you see that?" And a lot of times my husband will say, "Well, I'm focused on the road." However, I did tell him on the last trip, he's now picking up on details and showing me things. So I think that's opened his eyes up.
Yes.
But I get that chance to take pictures of flowers, and a lot of times people will say, "You bring out other details that I might have missed with that picture."
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
get to put them on my blog. Sometimes I accompany them with articles, just as a piece where I might describe life with a learning disability. And I also have a little store where people can purchase the artwork with my photos as well. And it was unexpected when it happened
Mm-hmm.
with taking these. I always heard the theory that people with learning disabilities are good at art and are visual. And I thought, well, I can't draw a straight line. and that was not something, and I remember being really frustrated with it.
Mm-hmm.
And we were on a vacation uh, for a wedding, and I took a picture. We were touring a graveyard, and there was a beautiful statue of an angel in the cemetery. And I took a picture. Didn't think much of it, but my friend was looking through my pictures, and she was very particular. She said, "Wow, this is really good." And I thought, "Oh, if she says it's good, then I'm going to take note of this." And I just for the heck of it, I put it in a show, and I won a small award for
Oh,
the cemetery angel picture. And that
how
just
fun.
started taking more pictures and uh, learning different techniques and submitting them places as well.
That is fun. That is fun. And sometimes, you know, your life situations, you can make the best of it. It looks like you did
Mm-hmm.
with photography. It sounds like you had through the years, now that you have walked out of the whole primary school and high school
Mm-hmm.
era, and gone through what you've gone through. You have really expressed it well with the whole rainbow concept. I think, let me quote at the end, you wrote that rainbow has no end and no pot of gold at the end excepting fairy tales. He said, "My learning disability will never disappear, and I have not always found a prize at the end of such difficult situation. I have had disappointments and have limitations because of my disability, but the rainbow promises that there's something even better that is coming." That is so positive. And then I'm just thinking about your pictures and winning a prize with your pictures and things that you're not expecting, and can still come. And I'm sure you have many examples of that, that that the better that has come as a result. So your hopeful outlook, what were some influencers in your outlook? Is this just something that's part of your nature, or someone modeled it for you?
I had that model to me with my parents. They were definitely always the ones that they didn't give up on me from the time I was really young. They
Mm,
convinced me that I was smart. I just learned differently. And I also had God has blessed me with some wonderful supportive friends too,
that's awesome.
that they were always looking towards the positive and what I could do, and
Mm.
just that reassurance that things would get better as well.
Having that community of
Hmm.
family and friends can really make a difference. Okay, we're coming towards the end, and I wanted to ask you, after all the questions in our conversation, if there were one or two things you want the audience to really take away from our conversation, what would you want them to take away?
Well, first, I'd like to encourage people that have disabilities or don't to be able to know what they want in life,
Mm-hmm.
because I think there's a lot of people that might be afraid to wish or to dream or to hope, and to not be afraid to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I would also encourage them to be able to find a way to do it, because sometimes what we think might not be the way to do that. And sometimes success doesn't come in the package that we expect it to, but it comes into something even better.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, through your story, I have some takeaways too. I think that although there's naysayers,
Hmm.
but it's the voices of those encouragers that you hear the most. And I
Exactly.
saw it, I heard you say it like the student teacher. So I want, to encourage all of us to be an encourager. I also hear that, like you say, sometimes life doesn't give you things that you expect in the right package, but embrace your circumstances for what it might be, and don't fight it, but work with it. Is I think at the end of the day, that's the lesson learned. Don't fight it, but work with it, and use the accommodations that is afforded to you because it actually could help you. And then the last
Hmm.
thing that I heard, I think it's very important, is that if it's not there, you got to advocate for yourself and find your voice. And then your last comment is important, is find your interest and pursue it. And don't let people put you in a box.
Exactly.
That is awesome. Thank you so much, Michelle, for sharing with us, and um, putting out there your learning disabilities. But what I'm hearing a lot is what you're able to do. So thank you for just sharing your positivity with us, and we wish you all the best, and hope that you can continue to help many students with what you do at work, and hopefully this podcast will also help those who actually watched it. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of another exciting episode of Hello World. Please support our podcast by hitting the subscribe button. Also, don't forget to smash that like. Your likes will help our podcast reach more awesome people like you. Lastly, tap that notification bell to receive instant alert whenever we drop in a new episode. We can't wait to see you again on our next episode. Until then, keep on being a positive force in this world.